Okay, well, welcome back to Your Questions Answered. Today we're looking at the second part, dealing with religious liberty. This was the question that I had received last week, but chose first to identify what religious liberty is. But the question was, is religious liberty under attack? Now, it is under attack, and as Christians we should be concerned because we understand, as we discussed last week, that religious liberty really flows from a Christian worldview. We believe in the right of the individual to hold to their faith, to express their faith, to stand individually accountable to God. We believe that. We believe that even the atheist has the freedom in this life to reject the Lord, and so they need to have the freedom to do that. Now, that does not mean that we pretend that all paths are equal. That does not mean that there are no consequences for our worldview, but we understand individual soul liberty. And so we'll talk about, so we've talked about that. But James Madison in 1785 said this about religious liberty. He said, "The religion of every man must be left to the conviction and conscience of every man, and it is the right of every man to exercise it as these may dictate. The right is in its nature an unalienable right. It is the duty of every man to render unto the Creator such homage and such only as he believes to be acceptable to him. This duty is precedent, both in order of time and in degree of obligation, to the claims of civil liberty. The equal right of every citizen to the free exercise of his religion, according to the dictates of conscience, is held by the same tenure with all our other rights. If we recur to its origin, it is equally the gift of nature. If we weigh its importance, it cannot be less dear to us." So he affirms this is a liberty that is on par with every other religion, with every other liberty, and it's important that we contend for it, that we understand when it's under attack, that we would defend it, that we would be people of conviction and courage. And so, yes, it is under attack, and I'm going to give you just a few examples from our society. And really, we could go on for a long time, and I can go into deeper measure on these if I wanted to, deeper explanation, but for time's sake today, I won't do that. So this is just scratching the surface. The first is really kind of the context setter for our day, and is the Supreme Court case of Obergefell versus Hodges, which legalized so-called same-sex marriage across the United States. And this comes from from an article written by Ryan T. Anderson, but it notes about some of the dialogue that happened during the case. It says, in the oral arguments before the Supreme Court earlier this year, Justice Samuel Alito asked Solicitor General Donald Verrilli whether a school might lose its tax-exempt status because of its conviction that marriage is the union of husband and wife. Verrilli's response was chilling. "It's certainly going to be an issue. I don't deny that. I don't deny that, Justice Alito. It is going to be an issue." And it has been an issue. This idea that religious institutions, including religious colleges and universities, must conform their beliefs that are grounded on scriptural basis or whatever other religious beliefs that they hold, that they must conform to what the state sanctions to be the definition of marriage. Marriage is something that is extremely culturally and religiously significant. It is something that the Bible, for instance, says a lot about, and Christians should have strong convictions regarding. But we have found that as a result of this Supreme Court case, that religious considerations have been under attack, that individual expression of religious liberty is under attack. And this is true for colleges, for others, as we will see in just a few moments. And this is important because the founders would have never understood religious liberty to just be something that is expressed within the four corners of your church on Sunday mornings. Instead, like all other liberties, as we heard James Madison say, this is on par with all other matters, all other liberties. And so we have the right to exercise our freedom of speech elsewhere, other liberties, and the same is true for religious liberty. We have seen bakers, florists, and photographers under attack as a result of the Obergefell versus Hodges Supreme Court ruling. Now, I do want to note this when it comes to bakers, because this is very confusing for people. People hear that bakers are refusing to bake cakes, and they think, well, see, they are just choosing not to bake cakes because they hate gay people. Now, we should agree, we should universally despise anybody who would refuse to render services to somebody on the basis of hate. We should despise that. But that is not what's happening here. Not in the case of the Masterpiece Cakeshop or the bakery in Oregon, whose name has slipped my mind, and in others that have come up through litigation. Now, what is significant is that the bakers in these cases have not refused services to somebody because they were gay. Actually, in the case of Masterpiece Cakeshop, they had made baked goods for a couple, a homosexual couple, for years. They simply chose not to render their artistic expression in support of a ceremony. So they did not want to join in the ceremony, and they felt that their artistic expression was being used in a way that was contrary to their convictions. And thankfully, our courts have agreed with that. By the way, in the case of Masterpiece Cakeshop, they've had to agree multiple times because they continue to face legal challenges. But what we have found is that for the individual, you cannot be forced to support something or to render your artistic expression in support of something, your free exercise of speech to celebrate something for which you disagree. Think about this for a moment in a secular, and that's a secular issue in and of itself, but think of this in an issue, say in the realm of politics. Eminem, the rap artist, has been a vocal opponent of President Donald Trump. Could you imagine if Donald Trump wins the election again in November, if Eminem was forced to sing at his inauguration in January simply because Trump wanted him to be there? Now, Trump could choose any artist that he would like, but knowing that Eminem is opposed to him, could you imagine if he was forced to perform at Donald Trump's inauguration? Well, we'd say that shouldn't happen. You should not be forced to go against your convictions and to celebrate the ceremony of somebody else or of something for which you disagree. Most people would understand that. But when it comes to the issue of marriage, for some reason, people forget that principle and they think that people should be forced against their religious beliefs to celebrate something and to render their artistic expression in support of those things. And thankfully, our Supreme Court has come down on the side there of religious liberty, but this continues to be under fire, and that's the point here of this discussion. These individuals, florists, bakers, photographers, local ordinances, state ordinances, other laws continue to go into play to try to attack this conviction. And so this is something that is going to result in florists, in photographers, and bakers continuing to face legal challenges, which is going to tie up their time and it's going to cost them money, and it's probably going to result in some businesses being closed because they are unduly being targeted because of their religious convictions. In 2015, to change gears here, we saw that sermons were subpoenaed in the city of Houston. Anise Parker, the mayor of Houston, subpoenaed the sermons of 5 conservative pastors seeking to determine how they had addressed the passage of a controversial law that critics argued hindered religious liberty for the sake of the homosexual agenda. Now, ultimately, those subpoenas were dropped after they faced a counter litigation. And people have tried to frame this as, well, Christian ministers spoke out against the passage of the law, and so the city was justified in reviewing their sermons. This would have never, ever stood up, though, in the Supreme Court. But what's interesting is that somebody who's willing to put their toes in the water and to see how much they could get away with. What they wanted to know is, could we censor sermons? That really is the point here. Can we tell pastors what they can and cannot say from the pulpit? Can we censor them? The answer to that is absolutely not. Not if you believe in religious liberty. We see challenges like this, and then we find often that if somebody's able to get away with something, they push it even further. Thankfully, that was pushed back, but it does not remove the fact that religious liberty was under fire and continues to be. Now, the Heritage Foundation addressed the topic of religious liberty being under attack in the ongoing fight over abortion. The Supreme Court once observed, and I'm going to have a link to this in the description of the video. Men and women of good conscience can disagree, and suppose some always shall disagree, about the profound moral and spiritual implications of terminating a pregnancy, even in its earliest stage. Many of the current struggles for the protection of religious liberty stem from government attempts to force individuals who sincerely and vehemently oppose performing or facilitating abortions to do so. This issue is distinct from the question of the extent to which the government itself may limit, protect, or facilitate access to abortions. One of the greatest assaults on religious liberty and faith-based institutions in the history of the United States Department of Health and Human Services mandate requires non-exempt employers to cover sterilization, prescription contraceptives, abortion-inducing drugs, and related patient education and counseling services in their health insurance plans. A narrow exemption covers houses of worship, but countless religious employers, such as religious schools and universities, hospitals, and charities, are forced either to comply with the HHS mandate in violation of their faith or to pay significant financial penalties. The HHS mandate violates the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, a federal law that prohibits the federal government from imposing a substantial burden upon a person's exercise of religion, unless the government can demonstrate that imposing that burden is the least restrictive means of furthering a compelling governmental interest. Now, again, this is something that the Heritage Foundation was absolutely correct in. Again, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Little Sisters of the Poor 2 weeks ago. But what's significant is that this little monastery has been under, I'm sorry, that's not the right word, convent has been under attack, has faced legal challenges time and time again. This charity, simply because they refuse to offer contraceptive coverage in their health insurance. That is problematic. In no way should employers be forced to forsake their religious convictions to appeal to a government's convictions regarding access to abortion. So that's something that should be concerning to all of us. And again, the continued litigation that employers face, being threatened with legal action even, to express their religious convictions, that is definitely an attack of religious convictions, of religious liberty. And finally today, I'm going to wrap up with a quote from Sean Patrick Maloney, the state of New York's 18th Congressional District Representative. This is about a month or so ago. He was addressing a Supreme Court decision, and he said this: "And we know that Neil Gorsuch is a supporter of so-called religious liberty, which is a bogus term." This is a congressman saying that religious liberty is a bogus term. And he went on to describe it as a pretext for discrimination hiding behind the guise of religion. Now, the freedom of religion, by the way, of religious expression, does not only appeal to people who hold religious beliefs, and that's something that's a common misunderstanding. In fact, this could be described as the liberty of conscience. You have the freedom in our country to be a person of faith or not to be a person of faith, to embrace whatever type of faith you would choose, or to embrace none. You have the liberty to do that. You cannot be compelled to change your religious convictions. You should not be able to change your convictions to align with a state's definition of morality, of belief. As we've seen, the state has tried to oppose that, either local or government ordinances, in relation to the topics of homosexuality, transgenderism, abortion. These are significant topics in our day, and they pose a unique threat. Thankfully, the Supreme Court continues to side with religious liberty, but that does not change the fact that individuals such as this congressman are vehemently opposed to this right. They misunderstand it, and they actively attack it, which should be concerning to all Americans, and especially to all Christians. This is a significant liberty, and we must contend for it. So yes, religious liberty is under fire. These are just a few examples. I've provided more in the description to this video. I hope it's an encouragement to you, and by encouragement, I mean I hope it challenges you and encourages you to recognize the threats to religious liberty, to contend for it, to understand what you believe and why, and to speak out, not just in the context of church, but outside as you exercise your religious liberty in all areas of your life. May the Lord bless you.